All right. Maybe put in chat here if anyone in this part are on the screen on the REPL ready to code. If not, I can help you figure it out. Hello, Thaw.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good, good.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started now. Anyone who comes in later, we can just go with the flow there. All right. How many people made it in the chat? Just type in ready if you are on REPL and at the screen ready to code. All right, take your time. And me though, how are you doing? Were you able to make the account? Yeah. Okay. From after making the account, you click on the toolbar on the top left, click on the big create button, and then you type in node on the template bar here. Type in node, click on Node.js, and then click on create REPL. So toolbar, create, type in node, create REPL. Hello. All right, nice to meet you though. Welcome. T iPhone. Is that a different username than normal, or are you new?
I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's my first time, so I have kind of like figured it out.
All right, nice. So quick thing. To get started, we are going to get ready a code editor. The code editor we will use is called REPL. I am posting the link in chat. If you go in REPL, there is a button that says get started coding or start coding. Click on that, and then have you make an account. And then once you make an account, you'll be at this page.
Okay. Okay, can't see. REPL.
Replit.com.
REPL. Should I mute mine or is that okay?
That's fine.
Start coding.
And to everyone else, you can unmute if you want. It's fine.
Okay. Where should I go now? I already logged in here.
You go to the toolbar on the top left, click on create, and then in the little search bar, you type in node, and then you go down and click on Node.js, selecting your language, and then you go down here to create REPL.
Start coding. New wrap, right? Create. Okay.
Create node.
Which one? What language should I choose?
Node. You type in node, and then it should be node.js.
Yeah, node.
And then create REPL.
Create REPL. Okay. Yeah, got it.
Right. And to anyone wondering what the language we're using here is JavaScript. Node is a backend version of JavaScript. It's used to communicate with servers. For some reason, REPL tends to use the word node instead of JavaScript because depending on your context, you either mean node or JavaScript. They're mostly interchangeable, but sometimes not. But for your knowledge, the language we're using is REPL. Language we're using is JavaScript. JavaScript is a coding language. It is the one used for all websites. It is the one used for mostly anything you see on the internet is written using JavaScript. All right. But the main thing is that by learning one language, you can then learn any other language for any other functionality. Once you understand the syntax, you can learn different syntax. All right. Shoot, what's that? All right, sorry about that. Okay. So, sorry about that. Technical issues. First, we'll start with the basic programmers thing. It's called typing in counsol.log, counsol spelled CONSOL, then period, and then LOG.
Console dot log. Okay.
Then we'll type in left parenthesis. That should be, and then shift, and then over your 9, left parenthesis. And then as you see, the moment you type that, REPL writes in the right parenthesis. REPL being an IDE, it tends to, autocomplete some common programmer things. Hello. We are just on REPL here. We have some new people. We are going through the basics again. It's always good to keep reviewing, learning new examples, seeing new things. Right now we're doing the counsel.log. So counsel.log, left parenthesis. Then we'll type in quotation mark. And the second quotation mark is automatically filled in. And inside the quotation marks, we will write hello world. Click run, and the counsel logs hello world. All right, how many people have this working?
I do.
All right, nice. All right, any errors right now? Any problems?
No, I don't see any.
All right, okay. Moving on, that was the sort of, basic programmer thing. The first thing you always do is you hello world. Now, variables. A variable is a bucket that you can put information in. It is a identifier to later be able to access certain information. So to make a variable, we would type in var and then the name of the variable. Make sure to go VRA space, the name of the variable, and then type the equal sign. And we'll type in quotation marks. I'm a variable. Once we've done that, we can type in counsel.log, and then we can just type in X. We don't have to type in quotation marks. We don't have to type in a string or any other letters. Just counsel.log X, and you get I am a variable. The variable is basically a way to reference information for later use. Here we're referencing the variable X, and we're counsel.logging whatever X is, and X is the string, I'm a variable. Notice my use of the word string there. Instead of saying text or sentence, I'm saying the word string. That is because in JavaScript and all other programming languages, we have certain lingo for certain things. And most importantly, we have different lingos for different data types. This is a data type of a string, basically any text you want to put in. That's why we use the quotation marks. Anyone have this working? Any errors?
So I have to follow that.
All right. As I mentioned before, there are many different data types in JavaScript. And the most important data type, since the main point of all programming languages is just to be a calculator. That is the sort of like initial fundamental thing that all programming languages need to be able to do, is to be able to emulate anything you can do in math. So, and in math, there are also variables. That's why there's variables in JavaScript. So, there is another variable type that's called number. We can do var x is equal to 25. Instead of quotation marks, we have just the number 25. And if we run it, we get 25. And as I said, we can do math. So we can do var x equal to 25 plus 25. 25 minus 25. 25 times 25 using the star symbol, and 25 divided by 25 using the slash symbol. All right, anyone want to try a couple of those operations there? And anyone getting any errors? All right. Now, this is the part of JavaScript that is more dynamic. This is if statements. So let's say we have var x equal to 25. And now let's say we wanted to go, we wanted to do different things based on whether or not x is greater than or less than 30. Because let's say we didn't know x is 25 for whatever reason, whatever environment we want to work in, we can go if x is less than, using the less than symbol, if x is less than 30. So if parenthesis x is less than 30, parenthesis. So if x is less than 30, we would then type curly brace. This is probably a symbol you haven't used before. The curly brace is if you shift it to the key to the right of your P key. To the right of your P key, there's a curly brace key. If you make the left curly brace, Ref will make the right curly brace, and then inside the curly braces, you click enter. And inside the two curly braces on the next line here, we type in console.log quotation marks x is less than 30. All right. Does anyone have that? Have that work in here? I'll run it here, get x less than 30. Nice, good. And any errors? It's very easy to get errors here. All right. All right, a quick run through of the different syntax here. The word syntax is what we use for these like parentheses and brackets and stuff. Basically, the if keyword is an important keyword in JavaScript, just like the var keyword. It tells JavaScript, I'm doing something important here. I need you to be like asking questions here. So the if statement is an important keyword we use. Also the quotation marks. Quotation marks in the case of the if statement is the condition. Inside the quotation marks, we'll always be putting in whatever condition we want the if statement to be checking. If x is less than 30, then we'll count that log. Now, the brackets are the code we want to run if the if statement is true, or if the condition is true. Inside the brackets, we can put in as many lines of code as we want here. I'll cancel.log. Hello as well. I can put as much code inside these brackets as I want to. And last important thing is the idea of the left and right parentheses and left and right curly braces. We always use the left one to signal the beginning of whatever chunk of code we're writing, and the right one to signal the end. We would never just have like a single left curly brace or a single right one. In fact, that's the case of most errors. You will have like you forgot to make the right curly brace, and then REPL will error out. All right. There is more we can do with an if statement though. We don't have to just say, if this is true, write code or run code. If not, do nothing. We can also say else. Or I can write else on a separate line here, else, and then just curly braces. So else curly brace, write curly brace to end the code. We'll go inside the curly braces, counsel.log, x is not less than 30. And now if we have x equals 35, so x is greater than 30, we get x is not less than 30. This is because JavaScript runs from top to bottom. So first line sets x to 30. Third line checks if x is less than 30. It is not, so it doesn't run this code. Next line, it just says else, which means if the statement is false, if x is not less than 30, just run this code, no matter what the value of x may be. That's why we're not saying x is greater than 30, we're just saying x is not less than 30, because that's all we know. We know x is not less than 30. All right, any questions? All right, the final aspect of if statements is the if else, or else if, I mean. Basically, we can go if x is less than 30, we can then say else if x is greater than 30, and greater than sign is just the greater than sign. Else if x is greater than 30, curly braces, and inside the curly braces, counsel.log, x is greater than 30. Making sure to put the space between the else and the if here, because these are keywords, it's important to put spaces. And if you run it, right now oh yeah, there we go. We get x is greater than 30, because x is 35. If you put x back down to 25, you get x is less than 30. Any questions? Anyone have this code running? Has anyone been running the code and has it running correctly? All right. Good job. Now, what would happen if we set x to 30? Any guesses as to which console.log we would run? Any guesses? Oh, we can actually see here, we can just run it, and we get x is not less than 30. In fact, the console is probably a good time to update this console.log, because really what we're saying is x is not less than or greater than 30. Because what we've checked is if x is less than 30, and we've checked if x is greater than 30. So, and otherwise, that means it's not less than, not greater than. So x is not less than or greater than 30. We can also just say x is equal to 30 at this point, but better safe than sorry. Now, how would we check if x is equal to 30? You may think we can go if x equal sign 30, console.log. But we cannot do this. In fact, if we did, we would get nothing. This is because in JavaScript, we have a different syntax for setting a variable like var x equal to 30 and checking if a variable is equal to something else, is equal to another integer. To check if a variable is equal to 30, we can type x equals equals, having two equal signs. That's just the JavaScript syntax. You will get used to seeing it. So now we can say x is equal to 30. All right, any questions as to that? All right. Let's real quick go over one thing here. One interesting thing about JavaScript is that there's a difference between declaring a variable and setting a variable. When you declare a variable, you tell JavaScript, hey, I have a variable called x and its value is 30. By setting a variable, like let's say you want to change the variable of x. You don't always want it to be 30, you want to change it. We can just type in x is equal to 20. You don't have to use a variable, we just type in x is equal to 20. This is important because we're not creating a new variable, we're just changing the variable x. So one interesting thing that happens here is that if we go var x equal to 30, if x is equal to 30, curly braces console, and you don't need to type it down, I'm just showing you, console.log x is equal to 30. On the next line, outside the curly braces, we are setting x to 20. We can then go if x is equal to 20, console.log x is equal to 20. Now, if you can see, both logs fire because JavaScript goes from top to bottom. It first checks x is 30, is x 30, run console.log. Now make x 20, is x 20, console.log. Any questions as to that? All right. Oh, and one other interesting thing we can do here is, let's say we were to do this. If x is equal to 30, cancel log x equal to 30, we can then say x is equal to x plus 1. Or in other words, x being 30, we're setting x to 30 plus 1. Or in other words, we are just adding 1 to x. So if x is 30, add 1 to x. This is just a roundabout way of saying add 1 to x. It's kind of the basic way of doing it in JavaScript. So we're adding 1 to x. Then if x is 31, cancel log x is equal to 31. And boom. Any questions there? Especially about the plot. Yeah, go ahead.
If you change x to the 29, then the if wouldn't work then, right?
Yes. If you change x to 29, then neither of the if statements would fire. Because not only if x not equal to 30, but also you're never incrementing x at all. Because the incrementation of x happens within the if statement.
Mm.
And quick lingo there, incrementation just means adding 1 to. In JavaScript, you tend to add 1 to a variable a lot, so we call it incrementation, or to increment. All right, and the reason I tell you about incrementation is because it becomes very important in the very next example. Let's say we have a new variable. We'll call it I is equal to 0. And let's say we wanted to console.log every number from I to 20, or from 0 to 20. We could just console.log 0, console.log 1, and then just keep going all the way to 20. That is the long way of doing things. Instead, we would type in while. While is a new keyword here. While, parentheses, I is less than or equal to, new sign here, less than or equal to. Very simple, it's just a less than sign and the equal to sign. This means less than or equal to 20. This is the condition here, and then we'll go curly braces, console.log I. Now, at first, this looks like an if statement, but we wrote while for some reason. The reason we write while is because a while loop is a new keyword. The while loop will keep running the code inside the curly braces, in this case, console.logging I, while I is less than or equal to 20. So while this condition is true, it will keep console.logging I over and over again. Now you may be saying 0 will always be less than or equal to 20. Whatever stops the while loop? And as you can see, nothing does. It will just keep console.logging I. So we need some way to be able to stop the while loop. We need some way to be able to get I all the way up to 20. We can do that by doing I is equal to I plus 1, as we saw earlier, incrementing I every single time. And as we can see, what we end up getting is every number from 0 to 20. Because first I is 0, 0 is less than or equal to 20, console.log 0. Increment 0 by 1, so now I is 1. 1 is less than or equal to 20, console.log 1, make it 2, 2 less than or equal to 20, console.log 2, and so forth until I is 20. 20 is less than or equal to 20, cancel log 20, add 1 to 20, that's 21. 21 is not less than or equal to 20, so you do not run the code in the while loop, and you continue on. Any questions there? Anyone able to get this code to work? All right. And one way we can see to simplify the while loop is that I is equal to I plus 1 is written many times. Whenever you're making while loops, you need to write this I is equal to I plus 1. So one way programmers have shortened that, because everything programmers do is built around making things smaller. We can instead write I plus equals 1. This just means literally add 1 to I. And as you can see, still works. We can also write in plus equals 2. We can write any number we want here. Plus equals 5. As you can see, we get different councils every time. And finally, there is one even shorter way of doing things, because almost every time when I'm making a while loop, we're going to be writing plus equals 1. We're going to be adding 1 to I. So for the even shorter way of doing things, we would type in I plus plus. This syntax in JavaScript, the JavaScript will kind of look at this and say, oh, you just mean add 1 to I plus plus. And as you can see, works just fine. I plus equals 1, and I equals I plus 1 all mean the same thing. Just I plus plus is the shortest way possible of writing it. Any questions? All right. And finally, we can also add 2 other things we learned here together. Many times you're going to actually want to add the if statement into the while loop. Let's say how should I do this here? Okay. Let's say while I is less than or equal to 20, if I is equal to 2, or let's say if I is equal to 8, then we will console.log the string I is equal to 8. Otherwise, or else, curly brace, console.log I is not equal to 8. And obviously we must still at the very end go I plus plus. This is a not very useful while loop. It will keep incrementing I all the way from 0 to 20. Every time, console.logging I is not equal to 8 until I is equal to 8, and then it will console.log I is equal to 8. And as you can see, it works just fine. This is a very specific example, but it's an example of a time where you can put an if statement into a while loop. In fact, almost all the keywords we use, you can stack them and everything. In fact, you can even put if statements into if statements. There's a whole lot of like heavy logic you can do there. Any questions on this? All right. Now, quick poll here. Does everyone think they kind of understand how like the while loops and if statements work? Like, should I talk more about while loops and if statements, or should I go to a new thing? All right. No, all right. All right. Here is the third pillar of JavaScript. So far we've done variables, if statements, while loops. I guess the fourth pillar of JavaScript is the array. Basically, an array is for when you want a lot of variables, or when you want a lot of variables that all have the same overall meaning. For example, I could type in var student1 is equal to the string metho. Var student2 is equal to the string saw, and just go for all my students. Instead, I could say var students is equal to square brackets. The square bracket is just under the curly brace, or sorry, it's actually the same key as the curly brace. You just don't need to shift. The square bracket tells JavaScript you're creating an array. So var students equals a square bracket, and then here I can type in quotation mark Miku, or sorry, Metho, comma, quotation mark, shoot. Thaw, comma, lucky, comma, 1.1.20, then, comma, T iPhone. And that is an array of all my students, an array of strings, an array of text here. Now, each element of the array can be accessed. Let's say I just want whatever the third item of this array here is. And notice I'm using a lot of different words here to refer to one piece of information in the array. I'm saying element, I'm saying item. There's even more words. For some reason, programmers have decided there are like 100 different words that can all refer to which piece of information in the array you want. Element is the one you hear a lot, also item, those are the two main ones. So let's say I wanted the first item in this array. I wanted the name Metho. I wanted to console.log Metho. I'd go console.log students square brackets 0. And I console.log Metho. Now, how does this work? The square brackets just tell JavaScript that I want a particular item in the array. And each item in the array has a number value, and that number value starts at 0. So Metho is actually the 0th item in the array. So the first, Lucky is the second, then is the third, T is the 4th. So if I get 0, I get Metho. 1, I get Thaw. If I go 4, I get iPhone or T. And if I do 5, I get undefined because there is no 5th element in the array, there's only a 4th. Any questions? All right. Now, arrays can also be used with all the other stuff. In fact, the main thing you use a while loop for is actually going through an array. Because let's say I wanted to counter-log every single item in this array. I could go counter.log students 0, and then students 1, students 2, every single time. Or if I just wanted to counter.log every item in the array, I could say while parentheses. Oh wait, shoot. First I need to create the variable I, var I is equal to 0. That's important. While I is less than students dot length. Students dot length is a property of students. The length property is just tells us how many items are in the list. So students dot length is just 5. When JavaScript comes down here, it's the students dot length. It just replaces that with 5. So while I is less than students dot length, we can say console.log students I. And in a second here, REPL is being a little slow. Oh, actually, I made a big mistake here. I put square brackets on the console.log. It should be parentheses. There we go. Oh, and I made another mistake. Okay. That's why it was taking so long. I forgot to increment I every time. Always make sure to put that I++, because then you can create what's called an infinite loop, where the while loop will constantly be console.logging students I, and it would never stop. In REPL, you can just click stop, but like if you do this on a browser or something, you just can't stop. You have to force create Google. It sucks. All right, but now it should work, and I get every item in my list or in my array. Now, the way this works is we have I at 0. I is less than student.length being 5. I is less than 5, console.log students I being 0, we get meso, increment I. 1 is less than 5, console.log students 1 being saw, increment I, and continue till we're at the end of the array. Any questions here? Actually, quick poll. I realized I actually didn't ask anyone beforehand. How much like coding knowledge does everyone, what do you say, currently have? Like, how new is everyone here? Or had before this class, that is.
I'm new.
All right. Nice, nice. All right. Just want to do a quick poll there. I knew Java a little bit. Nice. Yeah, Java is a, or one new, yeah, new to Java. Make sure to say it is JavaScript. JavaScript is different from Java, just a quick thing. Java is a whole different language. It's actually much older. All right. Right, yeah, me too. All right. Next thing we're going to do here. Oh, actually, one thing I'd like to clarify here. When we do this kind of while loop where we're getting the length of the string and then logging every item in the array, we call that looping through an array. We can also call that iterating through an array. Just the idea that of this incrementing I and then accessing whatever information in that student's I is done so much in JavaScript that we have our own word for it. In fact, many people say, okay, just loop through the array. That just means in a while loop, keep incrementing I and then accessing and doing something in some way to each element of students. All right, but it's also important to know that nothing in the while loop makes you inherently looping through the array. Like I don't even have to console.log students here. I can console.log hello, and I'll just console.log hello 5 times. We just like to call it iterating through the array, even though it doesn't have any inherent thing about the while loop, but making it iterate through the array. Just clearing something up there for future knowledge. Now, this is actually, for the next thing here, this is actually something I forgot to teach some of the older students. That is actually manipulating the array. Let's say, oh, I got this error, shoot. What error? Invalid unexpected token. At JS1, var students. Huh. I honestly don't know what's wrong there. One second. Okay, I see one thing. It's possible that for some reason I see your, oh, we'll try to refresh, okay. I will say, I do see your quotation marks look a little different from like my quotation marks. I'm not sure why that is. Sometimes there's like a different quotation mark and it messes things up. I'm not sure though. Because I don't see anything else wrong. Okay. Anyways, that's called, okay. The thing I want to teach you is manipulating an array. Basically, what do we do if after we declared students, we want to add things to the array or move things? What we can do, let's say we want to add another student, because actually I forgot the chosen one in creating my array here. So let's go students dot push. But push is a keyword here. Students dot push parentheses quotation marks chosen one. And then afterwards, let's say we wanted to console.log students. We get, as you can see here, we get Mesothal, Lucky, iPhone, and also the chosen one. Interesting thing here, in here, we're actually just console.logging the entire array. In some languages, you just can't do that. Or in certain IDEs, you can't do that. But in REPL, you can just console.log students and you get the entire array in this nice little formatting here. Now, what does dot push do? Dot push just adds whatever is in the parentheses. It adds it to the end of the array. As you can see, mesos do the first element. Chosen one is just the new last element, the 5th element. In fact, we can go students 5 and just get chosen one. Any questions there? All right, any errors anyone's getting? All right. Another thing is that if you want to remove chosen one from the list, let's console log students, and then afterwards, we will type in students.pop. Pop will remove the last item from the list. Students.pop, and then you just type in parentheses and nothing else. You don't put anything inside the parentheses. It is important still to add the parentheses though. Students.pop. Oh shoot. And then we will now console.log students again. And as you can see, we have one console.log of an array with chosen one and one without chosen one. All right, any questions? All right. Now, one interesting thing we can do with arrays is, let me show you here. Let's say we have var numbers is equal to square brackets. We're just creating a new variable called numbers, and then we're making an array and not adding anything to it. We just have an empty array here by just having square brackets and not adding anything. Now we can make a while loop here, var I equals 0, while I is less than or equal to 20. We will now do numbers dot push I plus plus. And what this will do is just add every number from 1 to 20 to the array. At the very end, we can go console.log numbers. And we get an array with every number from 1 to 20. This is especially useful if you want to create an array that has every number from 1 to 1,000. Instead of writing every single number from 1 to 1,000, we can just while loop in every number from 1 to 1,000. And REPL actually can't console.log every single item there. So it's telling us there are 901 more items. But trust me, it does exist. All right, any questions there? All right, I will now move on to the final new thing I'll be showing you guys today. I alluded to it a bit. I showed you it a bit in the last class, but now I will actually show you how to use them. It's a very important thing in JavaScript. It is called functions. A function is a way to store code for later. I can write function. This is a new keyword, just function. Oh wait, no, shoot, sorry. One other thing, I need to go var x is equal to, x being the name of a function. Var x equal to function, we then type in parentheses and curly braces. This is setting the variable x to be a function, or in other words, to be a bucket instead full of a variable or full of a value, like we usually go x equal to 20. Instead of having this variable x be equal to a value, we have it be equal to an entire block of code. Var x equal to function, empty parentheses, curly braces, counsel.log, I'm a function. We can also counsel.log afterwards, I run code. And then later, if we want to run this very specific line of code, we can type in x and then empty parentheses, just like we did with that .pop. We type in x and empty parentheses. And if we run it, we get I'm a function, I run code. And we can keep repeating this function. We can keep writing x empty parentheses, x empty parentheses, x empty parentheses. We get I'm a function, I run code 3 times. Any questions there? All right. Now, there is actually so many things we can do with functions. For example, let's say I wanted to be able to create a function that adds 2 numbers together. I write a lot of code where I end up needing to add 2 numbers together, and I don't want to write 2 + 2 every time. I'm a very lazy person. I can make a function here. I'm going to show you a lot of different syntax here. We will call the function add. This is a new name for the function. When writing functions, we tend to want to give them a name that describes what they do. In the function, we will type in n1, comma, n2. n1 and n2 might as well just be x and y. In fact, I can just write x and y here. Might be a little easier. X comma y. This is actually just creating 2 more variables whose values will be set when you call the function. In fact, if I go here, I'll type in return x plus y. This is the code. This creates a function that you can input into it. You can input into the function 2 numbers, and it will give you a new number, which is the 2 numbers added together. I'll explain to you exactly how this works in a second, but I will show you. I can now counsel.log add, and in the parentheses, I'll type in 5 and comma 4. And this will counsel.log 9. The way this works is when you call add, that's a new keyword there, we're saying the word call. That means you're writing the word add and then these parentheses. So when you call add and you pass it in the number 5, 5 is becoming x, or x, you're basically setting x to 5. And then you're also passing the number 4, so you're setting y to 4. These can be any numbers or any letters. I can call this one n1, this one n2, if I wanted to. And then I can use these variables to do whatever I want with them. I can add n1 and n2 together. Return is the keyword I'm using to say output this, output n1 plus n2. So 5 and 4 are the input to the function, and then you return the output. The output here being 9. Any immediate questions there? I'll keep explaining it, but any questions? Also, anyone just completely confused here? All right, everyone kind of following along? Everyone gets it? All right. Now, quick thing on keywords, the difference between input and output here. The inputs are whatever numbers you're feeding into the function. Outputs are the number you're getting back. You can kind of think of a function like a black box. You are giving it numbers, and then it will give you some other number. Or giving it values, and it will give you some kind of value. Every function has some kind of purpose. I can make another function here called subtract equals function x and y, return x minus y. And instead of add, I can cancel the log subtract. I'm calling the function subtract, passing it in 5 and 4. And I expect to get back a number that is the difference between 5 and 4 being 1. JavaScript is built on this idea of having code that is somewhere else that you don't actually care about how it's being done, but you will get back some kind of value when you pass it in values. All right. We can now make some more interesting functions here. Let's say we just have x. We have a function called is even. That is our function, is even. And as the title says, the goal of the function is to find out, is a number even? You will pass me in a function, I would tell you whether or not that number is even. Okay, let's see how we would go about writing this. First, we will make a variable called answer. Answer equals false. False is another Boolean type, or another data type called a Boolean. Basically, we've gone through, strings. We've gone through numbers or integers. There are also Booleans. A Boolean is just a number like false or true. It is used for like if statements. For example, I could write if true, and that would just mean run the code. Because what if statement is doing is it's checking the condition, x is less than 30, for example. And then if it's true, it's just, imagine JavaScript is putting a true here for the if statement, or a false. True or false are logical Boolean values, and they're very important. In fact, I'll show you why they're important here. For answer is equal to false, so now type in if x modulo, if x modulo 4 is equal to 0, new mathematical symbol there, modulo just means the percent sign. Modulo just means x divided by 4, and then give me the remainder. Actually, I made a mistake here. I should write 2. X modulo 2 is equal to 0. The point of this is that 3 modulo 2, so 3 divided by 2, and then give me the remainder. 3 modulo 2 is equal to 1. In fact, all odd numbers, when given the modulo of 2, is equal to 1. And all even numbers, modulo 2 is equal to 0. So 4 modulo 2 would be 0, because 2 goes into 4 evenly. There's no remainder. So if x modulo 2 is equal to 0, we will set answer equal to true. In this case, we actually don't really need to have the Boolean. We can even just type in our answer is not true, and then set x equal to is it true here, or maybe if even. But it's usually almost always more important to have Boolean values like true or false. So var answer is equal to false. We set x to false initially because if x modulo 0, if x modulo 2 is 0, we're setting it to true. And then we will return answer. And if we count.log if even 4, we get true, and count.log if even 5, we get false. Any immediate questions here before I continue explaining it?
Would you mind explain the modulo again, please?
Yes. Let's actually go though up here. Let's just type in a couple modulo problems here. Count.log 4 modulo 2. We get 0. We also type in 5 modulo 2, and we get 1. The idea is that, like in like 4th grade math, we used remainders. Remember, like 5 divided by 2 is equal to 2r1 remainder 1. The modulo just gives you that remainder. It doesn't give you the actual division. For example, if we went 5 divided by 2, I get 2.5. It just gives you the remainder. And it is almost always just useful in this one case of if x modulo 2 is equal to 0. Because if you think about it, there's really no other way to tell if something's even. There is one other thing. It's much more difficult to tell if something's even. This is the simplest way to tell if something is even.
Thank you.
Welcome. Oh, and if we go if even 5, we get false. One other little thing to mention. Let's say I just wanted to write like things for a future programmer, like they're reading through the code and they want to see what if even does. I can type in slash this returns if number is even. This is called commenting something. It just tells JavaScript that this is not code. This is just me writing something. So I go slash this returns if number is even. You'll see a lot when reading through code. Programmers like to document their code for other programmers to be able to see what things mean. Do a slash this number returns even. All right. And the reason we want to put in Booleans here is because it's almost never useful to just see like the text is even or is not even, because we can do something like this. If is even 4, or we can go if is even 8, let's say, brackets counsel.log the number 8 is even. Now, the reason that's why we put false and true rather than just a string, because if we put in true, then this function will return the value true, which the if statement automatically knows. True just means true, so run the code. If it gets false, it will not run the code. As you can see, run the code here. If you do 7, do not run the code. Because a function is meant to be its own black box, it's almost always better to let the programmer be able to do things with the information you get, and not just like give something very specific like a string. It's almost always better to have a Boolean. And we can also type in other numbers, 400. Any questions there? All right. Okay. Now, let's try to do something else with functions. Let's try a bit of practice with some like nesting if statements. Let's say we have a function called adventure. And we're going to get in the adventure, we're going to get input. Or we'll call it string. We can then go if string is equal to turn right with a countflow.log. You see a bear, else countflow.log, input not valid. This is basically the basics of one of those text-based adventure games. This is the actual code you would see. You're just, if the input string is equal to a certain thing, print the text. If not, print some kind of like error text. We can say countflow.log adventure, and then turn right. And we get you see a bear. If you type in anything else like turn left, you see input not valid. We can do even more logic here. We can also add else if string is equal to turn left. Countflow.log, you see a fountain. Now let's say we wanted to have a bunch of different inputs. We wanted to be able to actually do a whole game with this and say, okay, you do this input, then this input, then this input. We'll actually have, let's change the variable to strings and make sure to update our variables here. And we'll actually have strings be an array this time. So when we input it, we'll put in turn left. As an array here, we'll put in the square brackets. One interesting thing here is that you don't need to have a variable, although actually, when we think of it, let's just put in a variable. Adventure text is equal to an array. I'll put turn left in there. And then in the adventure function, in the parentheses, we'll type in adventure text. Basically, we're passing in the function, we're passing it in a variable. Now in this array, we put in turn left, turn right, and then walk forward. These are going to be a list of commands you are going to do. And the function, our goal for the function is to do each of the commands. So let's say we do this, okay? Else if strings 0, and also string 0, is equal to turn left, we'll then inside the else if statement, type in if strings 1 is equal to turn right. Countflow.log, you see a tower. What this is doing is it's first checking if string 0, string 0 being the string turn left, is equal to turn left, cancel log, you see a fountain. Then if string 1 is equal to turn right, then you see a tower. Notice that I am putting this if statement inside the last if statement. Because I only want it to run if this is true. And we have actually 3 commands here. I'll put in another command if strings 2 is equal to walk forward, console.log, you see a door. And what we're going to get here, if we run it, we get, you see a fountain, you see a tower, you see a door. This, again, is the basics of how the adventure game works. You just have a ton of nested if statements. That's not how adventure games work now. They have better ways of doing it. But old adventure games would have had a bunch of these if statements and just said, okay, if you say this, go here. Any questions there? I know this code probably looks really confusing, and it even does to a experienced programmer. Just going through some of these things though, is that you always know that a left bracket is going to have a right bracket somewhere. So you can see this right bracket, or this left bracket actually correlates to this right bracket down here. This left bracket correlates to this right bracket. This left bracket is ended by this right bracket on line 13. In IDEs, if you click on the actual bracket, it actually highlights what bracket is ending the if statement. All right, any questions before we wrap up this class here? We actually went very far, farther than I thought we would. But any questions? All right, and one thing to remember is that it's good to be confused or frustrated, because you probably will be confused when looking at all this messy code here. But being confused and frustrated means you're learning. If you're always like, oh yeah, okay, get that, you're not actually learning anything. All right. All right. Now I'd like to give a bit of homework before we kind of stop here. And so the bit of homework I'll give is, why don't you guys try to make it an adventure game of your own? Make a function here, have an array of the different commands you'll be able to do, or the order of the commands, have the console.log with adventure, and have a if statement full of different commands that you can do and console.log that you'll get. Kind of an open-ended homework. Try your best to kind of create something there. You can even simplify it down and not use arrays or whatever, And then I have the Facebook page and the Facebook group. I'll also make another post for the homework explaining again what the homework is, and then you can kind of put in the comments what kind of code you've written as the week goes by. We have another class this Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern time, and where we'll kind of go over this some more, give more examples and stuff. And then next week, the next Tuesday, we will go over some more useful things. We'll start trying to make like little websites and stuff, have some fun there. And any questions about anything we've covered before I end the session. I'm confused about what exactly? Or just in general? Why the result is like that? Okay, good question. And actually, to simplify this down a little bit, I'm actually going to take out a couple of the things we don't need. For example, this if statement is never going to be utilized because we're not turning right. Oh, what is the undefined in the output? Good question. I'm not sure. All right, I'll go over Mizo's question first. Then I'll try to figure out what the undefined is. I'm honestly not sure. All right, let's say we just had this, a little bit simpler here. We're given in the function a array of strings. What we're first looking is if the first element of the string is equal to the string turn left, we'll count that log, you see a fountain. Then we're going to ask another question. If the second element of the string or of the array is equal to the string turn right, cancel that log, you see a tower. And then finally, if the third element is equal to walk forward, cancel that log, you see a door. If we run it here, we get the same thing. And also, if we instead put in turn right at the very beginning, we get nothing because we go, if it's turn left, well, it's not turn left, so you don't do any of this other code because it's all nested. It's all inside this if statement here. Don't do any of the other code and just stop. But we do type in turn left, so we get the whole dialog tree. Does that help? All right. Welcome. Now, what is the undefined in the output? Sometimes REPL just has undefined for various reasons. Maybe it's the function. Shoot. See, if you type in, if you run nothing, get nothing. I'm actually not sure what the undefined is. I find it usually happens because when you create a function, REPL, yeah, undefined. When creating functions, REPL tends to put in undefined, usually because like you're setting a variable. It's a various things. It's mostly because of REPL. There's nothing wrong with it. But yeah, in REPL, you tend to see that little undefined at the end. All right. Hope anyone managed to learn a bit about programming today. I know we went over a lot of stuff, but we'll keep going over it as the classes continue. We'll keep finding new ways to use things. Especially next week, we'll find, oh, you're welcome. And especially next week, we'll actually get into website making, which will be fun. What adventure text do with the function on the top? I assume, okay, basically adventure text is a whole nother variable, and it's not a function, it's just a array. It technically has nothing to do with adventure if I just didn't name it adventure text. What we're doing with it though is we're passing the array adventure text into the function adventure. The adventure text here is just the string variable we put in here. I can even just rename this adventure text. The main point is that this string is just a variable like any other variable. It's just a way for me to identify whatever input I'm getting from the function. Does that answer your question? Okay. Could you try to explain your question some more. Do you mean like how it correlates to the function, like how it's related to the function? Okay. It's not related to the function. It's just an array. Because see, I can just take this array and put it here instead of adventure text. It's just, I'm just putting the variable here so that I have a way to refer to adventure text. But it's actually not necessary. I just put in an array right into the function. Did that answer the question? All right, nice. All right, hope everyone learned something today. The next class is at 12 p.m. Eastern time on Friday, but don't worry if you missed that, we'll just be going over some of this stuff more. And then the class after that is again today at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Hope to see you there, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.